Welcome back. In this video, we're going to pick up where we left off and keep talking about some of these important methods that I want to showcase. The next one we're going to discuss is attr, A-T-T-R, and it's short for attribute. So I'm going to go to the docs and just look for attribute. It's going to be up top here, A-T-T-R, there we go. And what we use it for is to retrieve the value of an attribute. So according to the docs, it gets the value of an attribute for the first element in the set of matched elements, or set one or more attributes for every matched element. So we can retrieve an attribute, or we can set an attribute. Hopefully you're noticing a pattern by now, where with these methods, we can either get information, retrieve an attribute, or retrieve styling, or retrieve the text or inner HTML, and then we can also set them by passing in an argument to the method. So one method behaves in two different ways. And this paradigm is called the getter and setter paradigm, where we have a getter to retrieve information and a setter to set a new value. Let's take a look at some of the examples here. The jQuery docs always have excellent examples and documentation and tutorial style writing. So let's take a look here. We have an image and it has an ID, a source, and an alt text. So we can select that. So we can select the image with great photo, the ID great photo .attr, and we pass in what we're trying to change, which is alt, and then we can pass it in a new value. And you can also see down here, we can use attr to set multiple values at once, or multiple attributes. So we can set the alt text and the title attribute by passing in an object, just like the CSS method. Okay, so let's play around with this. Here's our page we've been working with. I'm going to add in a little bit more of HTML content. So at the bottom here, I'm going to add an image tag, and the source is going to be my favorite Pine Marten. So adorable. And what we're going to do is use jQuery and the attr method to change that image source to the terrifying Pine Marten. Okay, so we'll refresh our page. Here's our image. And what would be a good first exercise is to select the image and make it a little bit more manageable, so smaller. So we'll select image.css, and we can start by just looking at what the width currently is, which is 1533 pixels. And let's make it a lot smaller. So we'll change width to 500 pixels. Just like that. Okay, that looks a lot better. And actually, let's go a little smaller, and let's even do 200. There we go. There's our adorable Pine Marten. So we'll use attr to go ahead and change the image source. So we need to select the image again, like that, .attr, and we can get the value of source first, just retrieve it. This is the image source. And then we can also set it by passing in our second argument, which is the URL that I copied and have on my clipboard. And there we go. It updates automatically, and there's our terrifying Pine Marten. So that's one example. Another thing that we could do here is select this input, which is type equals text, and we could change the value of the type attribute. So we'll do that here. Input, and then let's look at the attribute. Well, let's start by just looking at input. It's the only one on the page. And then we'll do .attribute type, and we see type is text. And now we can play around with that and change that to be type is color. And watch this input here as I hit enter. It now changes to a color input. And we can do the same thing, change it this time to be a checkbox. There we go. Okay, so let's go back to text, because we are going to use this later in the video as a text input. The last thing that I want to demonstrate is the behavior of the attr method on multiple elements. So let's add in a few image tags. So we'll do 1, 2, 3 images, and I am going to need to refresh to get those. And they're those gigantic images, so I'm going to resize again, and that will be image.css width, 200 px. And because of the magic of jQuery, that will make all of them 200 pixels. Okay, Let's suppose I want to only change the first one here to be the scary pine marten photo with the teeth. What I did earlier won't work. If I try and just select the image, that is actually all images. And so it will change all three of their image sources. So if I only want the first one, I can use image : and remember there's first of type, like that, or the built-in jQuery first, which is shorter, but actually slightly slower because it's not using a built-in CSS selector. So I'll go back to first of type, and then we can change source to be our scary image URL. And if I hit enter, it only impacts that first image. And if I wanted to update the last image to have the same image source, this terrifying pine marten, I have a few options. And the first one that I'll show is to select all images like this, and then use the .last method, which is something you haven't seen yet. And this will return the last element from a given selector. So this selects all three images, and then we're asking for the last one. And then we can do .attr source, and then we can paste in our image source and hit enter. And you can see that the last image is changed as well. And then lastly, I'll demonstrate changing all three of them together. So I have a new image URL I'll copy over here, and we'll change the source attribute on all of them by just selecting all images like this, and then running .attribute source, comma, and pasting in our new URL, and all three images change simultaneously. So to summarize ATTR, if we just give it one argument, like source, but we don't pass in a second argument, it will just return the value of source. So that's the getter. And then if we provide a second argument, like a new URL, like we did here, that will actually update the value of source on every single element that we selected previously. So the next thing that I want to demonstrate is the val method, so VAL. What val does is that it helps us extract the value from an input. So if you can think back to when we made that scorekeeper with plain JavaScript, and we had that number input. In that input, you could specify the winning score, if we're playing to 5 or to 10, and we needed to extract the value out of there, we used a property called .value. Well, .val is jQuery's wrapper for value, just like HTML is the wrapper for inner HTML, and text is the wrapper for text content. We can take a look at a few examples. As you can see here, if we don't pass in any arguments, it will return the value of a particular element that we select. So in this case, we're grabbing the drop-down menu, the select element with class of foo, and then we're doing .val on it, which will tell us which element or which part of the drop-down is selected. And then we can also use the same syntax, but we pass in an argument, and that will change the value of an input. So let's go to our text input here, and I'm going to clear the console, and we'll go ahead and select this text input. So we'll do $input, just like that, and then we'll run .val with no arguments. And right now, it will give us an empty string because the value in here is an empty string. There's nothing inside there. So if we type something now, like my name, and then we ask for the value, it tells us Colt Steel. So whatever is in here is grabbed when we run .val. And then like all the other methods we've seen, it will also act as a setter method. So if I pass in something like Rusty Steel, and I hit enter, you can see that it updates the input to now say Rusty Steel. You might be wondering when we would actually write code to update an input. Usually we let a user update the input. The one common use case that I can think of is if we wanted to clear the value. So if this was a to-do list and we wanted a user to be able to add new candies or something, I could type in jelly beans, which are way overrated by the way, and we could hit enter. And we want to add a new li, and then we want to delete what's inside of here. We would use .val. So I'll show you. Just looks like this. And then we're going to set it to an empty string. And that erases the content inside of there. So we will be doing that actually when we make our own to-do list. We'll use .val with an empty string to reset a text input. The last thing I'll mention is that .val works on all elements that have a value attribute. So it's not just inputs with type equals text. It's things like checkboxes and color inputs, but it also includes drop-down menus, which I can go ahead and write. We'll make a new drop-down menu, which is a select element. And then inside the select, we add in options. And each option represents one choice. So our options will contain some of the most popular pets in the country, like ostrich and turtle and toad. Okay, and we'll save and refresh the page. And you can see that we now have a drop-down menu with 3 choices. And if I want to know which choice the user has selected, I could go over here, and I don't just select input anymore. I would need to select either select, which will give me that drop-down menu, and then I just run .val on that, and it tells me that the user has selected toad. All right, so to wrap up, ATTR is used to access any specific attribute that we want, or to set an attribute, and then .val is used to retrieve the value or set the value of any sort of input or drop-down menu. All right,